Hi everyone, this is Elena Kraus and welcome to another card video. In this video, I'm using new Picket Fence Studio products. The stamp set here is where I work along with a new product called Paper Glaze. So let's get started. So here's the quick look of the stamp set. Here's where I work, and here's the Paper Glaze. The Paper Glaze comes in 13 colors. So here's a quick look of the colors. And I'll have a link in the video along in the blog post for to all the colors on the Picket Fence Studio page with the Paper Glaze colors. So here we have 12 and here's the 13th one. So let's get started. I'm using Bristol white cardstock, Bristol smooth cardstock. And I'll stamp with the black hybrid ink from Picket Fence Studio. This is waterproof ink, and as well it's alcohol marker friendly. So I'll be using the paper glaze for painting, not for applying to a stencil or for adding, like I'm adding texture but using a little paintbrush. So I have my piece of Bristol cardstock. It's 6 by 4 1/4 and then 4 1/2, and we're gonna trim it down to size to fit in on our A2 card. So I'm stamping a couple times using that black ink to have nice coverage because this is a large stamp, and I'm using my Misty. So I'm applying a second layer of that black ink. I want it like nice and intense and to have good coverage. Then I noticed there was one spot that wasn't really covered nicely. So I'm just inking up that spot and stamping with my Misty. So now we're done. And I'm going to clean my stamp using the Picket Fence Studio stamp scrubber. So you notice when it was first when I measured it on my Misty, it was a little less than 4 by 4. And that was when it was dry. Next, I went off the camera and I applied water. I put some water in it, squeezed it out, and it expanded to about 5 by 5 inches. And I just cleaned my stamp, and then since I didn't really squeeze all the water out, it left some water onto my stamp, so I just wiped that off with a cloth, and then you could see that it cleaned that stamp very nicely. Next, what I'm doing, I'm applying some heat to my cardstock because I stamped a few times. I wanted to make sure that the ink is completely dry before I start coloring so it doesn't bleed once I apply water. So here's that paper glaze. It has very smooth texture, and I had some backgrounds done using stencils, but in this case I'm using it, as I mentioned before, for painting. So I have a little palette there, and I'm applying the Marigold orange and brown Dahlia. I'm gonna mix those two colors a little bit, and I'm gonna only color the chairs and the cabinets that are on the back of this office to add a little bit texture and kind of more interest to that panel. So I'm using the Marigold orange. I added a little bit water to dilute it to have a smoother texture, or like more kind of watercolor or paint texture. But that's just for the first layer. After that, I will go apply the full intensity of that glaze. So I'm going with a little paintbrush, and I'm coloring the chairs. So I added a little bit from that brown Dahlia because I wanted to have more red color, kind of richer and deeper tone of that red. It's not red, it's like Marigold orange. So I'm just painting the chairs. And usually I let dry between apply layers, so that way I know that it will stick to the paper. So I'm just going over again, making sure we have nice coverage. So you can see I move from one spot to another, and then I'm going back. Next I'll start painting the cabinets. So here's one layer, and then this is a little bit diluted, and then I decided to go with full intensity of the glaze. And it added more texture. And I went with the brush up and down. I did vertical lines to get that texture of a cabinet. So next I'm adding again a little bit more to the chairs. Just pure Marigold orange paper glaze to have thicker coverage and deeper tone. I'm going back to the cabinet. So those are the first two that I colored that were with diluted brown Dahlia. Now I'm adding full intensity, and then I'm moving to the other cabinets. I just make sure after I have nice coverage that I go with the paintbrush in vertical lines to add that texture. So again, I'm going over them. And I have a couple cabinets left to paint. And after you're done painting, make sure that you clean up your surface right away, as well as your paintbrush, because this, once it dries, it's more permanent and it will stick to your paintbrush as well to your surface. If you have like porcelain, like my palette, that's not a plastic, it's a porcelain, you can scrub it off. But if it's plastic, it will you will need to scrub the plastic, and it will scratch your surface. So next I'll color the little pot with the plants. I'm using gold rose and brown dahlia to mix those to get some pottery color. It's more tan, not very gold, but tan. So I did it once. I didn't really like how it looked, the color. So I added more brown. I wanted a little bit darker because it was weird tan that I got. I should have mixed right away more of the brown dahlia. Now I'm going with my heat tool at setting 1, which is very low heat. That I put my hand underneath and it didn't burn. I just wanted to dry that to make sure that the paper glaze is dry before I moved on to watercoloring. So here I'm watercoloring the rest of my scene using Karin watercolor markers and a paintbrush. So I'm coloring everything very quickly, and I'll speed up the video here so there is no any signs in watercoloring here. I'm just scrubbing the watercolor markers onto my surface, and then picking up with my water brush and applying it to my card. You can as well add go with any other coloring medium of your choice to color that scene. Because I stamped onto BRISTOL smooth cardstock, I decided to go with watercolors. So I'm just painting the rest of the shelf. So next, there are 3 paintings on the wall, and I decided to do some scenery there. I'm just free painting, nothing really out of ordinary, just adding some brown, blue, and green. And then I'll add, after it's dry, I'll add a little bit blue on top for the sky. So we have some kind of nature paintings on the wall. So I'm coloring the walls with very pale yellow, and the floor it's pale gray. So now that that's done, I decided to go to add a little bit more paper glaze. I had one spot on the chair that the brown Dahlia paper glaze went on, so I just covered it with the Marigold orange. Next, I'm stamping sentiment that says congrats on your new job. And I stamped it with watermark ink and then emboss in white. Next, I'll trim my panel to fit onto A2 card size. So I trimmed it down to 4 by 5.25, and then I'll go back and cut off trim it to 3 3/4 by 5 1/4 because I decided to go to adhere that panel flush to the left side, so that way all the spacing around the top, bottom, and on the right are equal. I'm adding some fan foam. I'm using liquid adhesive, and I'll put a heavy acrylic block on top to make sure that it dries flat. And next I'll adhere it to my card base. So I'm using brown card base to match the sentiment. I'm adding some foam tape on back of the sentiment. And when it's dry, I'm using tear ruler to make sure that it's straight, and I'm adhering it to the card. That finishes our card for today. Here's a little close-up. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button if you wanna be updated when I have new videos. And see you soon in another video. Bye!